Alrighty, people. Welcome back to the Performance Playbook podcast. Today I've got Hobbs Margaret. My brother, how we doing?
I'm doing excellent. How are you today, Brandon?
Great. Well, I'm excited to have you on because this is, again, I tried to create and change this podcast in all things performance. And like when I was seeing the things that you were posting, I was instantaneously obsessed with it because it's like, hey, here's the beauty of farming and what it can produce. But you had a little bit of, like Socrates on top of it. And there was, like all this beautiful logic that was also brought upon it. Just for people to know who we are, or who you are, and what we're about to start talking about, can you give us a little intro on you?
Yeah, you bet. My name's Hobbs Margaret. I grew up in the Texas Panhandle on big ranches, but then I went to school at the University of Oregon and was there for 15 years. Worked as a composer and musician for a lot of my 20s, and then went back to ranching when I settled down and became a family man. But I studied political science. I've always been a huge reader and fan of philosophy, and I've been able to take that unique approach to ranching and farming itself, which is in such dire need of a completely new paradigm, so that humans can associate with it and nature more properly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
so that's my intro.
that's the synopsis of it. I love it. Well, so when I'm thinking, because again, like you just said, we are so disconnected from what farming looks like. I'm a California
Yeah,
boy, so I didn't know anything about farming, and then I came out. I'm here at Purdue, so I'm in West Lafayette, Indiana, and so
nice.
I got to see and feel a little bit more of what that actually looked like. I'm around a bunch of corn, but can you kind of just give us like the reason, like why would you get back into farming? What would be the reason for that for you? And maybe why would that be smart for other people to walk into that line of business?
Well, it's not an easy business, certainly at this point in time, because we live in a weird economy where you can only scale your business to the edge of your property, right? So you have a linear amount of stuff that you can grow, whereas if you go create a software platform or an app, it's infinitely scalable.
Mm,
So you have linear economic benefit competing with exponential economic benefit, and so it's very difficult. And so for me, it really comes down to the fact that all of the problems in our world. To answer your question in short, the reason why anybody should go into farming is because it's the right thing to do. Um, all of the problems of our world, to me, stem from the disconnect between the economy and the ecology. Right now we've stumbled upon this free energy for basically the last century in the form of fossil energy, and it has created this illusion that we have the ability to do more than we can into perpetuity. And so we've lost this sense of being and sense of place as an inseparable part of the planetary ecosystem. And since we've lost that understanding and we've lost the mythology that's associated with that, it's created this sort of schizophrenic civilizational psychosis, this psychology that we have, and everybody's unhappy because we're a bunch of hunter gatherers trying to become insurance salesmen. And so ultimately it's a very selfish thing for me, because I grew up on big ranches, and I know that ranchers are basically, in a way, kind of, and farmers to some degree, are the last real American subculture that's akin to a sort of an undomesticated human that's still connected with the cycles of the seasons and the planet to some degree, whereas 98% of people are completely not. So the reason that I went into farming is because I'm a hunter gatherer. That's why I'm a human being, and human beings are built to be integrated into the ecology. And the more human beings are properly oriented and integrated into the ecology, the healthier our civilization will be.
I love that. Well, here's the thing, though. Right? As you're speaking, you kind of remind me of the main character in Interstellar, the dad. I don't know if you've, and I'm saying that in the sense of like you can clearly tell you have a very great education behind you. And I feel like a lot of people want to go to a university such as you did, get a great education and be informed on the world around them. Do you think that actually makes you a better farmer?
Absolutely. I think that my liberal arts degree is the most important part of what makes me a rancher and farmer who is able to really dig down to the bottom of what's happening. Most people don't know how to think, and through university and a couple of great professors and a lot of great podcasts to this day, I've finally had some success in learning how to think about the world around me, and not a lot of people are very successful at that, sadly, and I think mostly by design.
Yeah.
So yeah, university has been really helpful for me in that regard. Reading books is extremely important. I think podcasts are filling that role to some degree as well. And I've reached this point in my life now where I listen to audiobooks a lot. I don't have a lot of time to be reading physical books, which is kind of sad. But I'm listening to audiobooks all the time, and I'm stopping and putting in notes of little quotes and stuff and things that I want to write about. So yeah, there's this curiosity that came as I don't know if it came as a result of going to university or I had that natural curiosity and university was able to help cultivate it. But certainly, in order to become a good at anything, you have to be very good at that thing and have a knowledge of other areas that you can then synthesize through that thing. And only then can you bring new discoveries, new information, new perspectives, new aspects to what you're doing. And so it wouldn't be worth a damn at all if I just went in and said, I'm going to ranch or farm exactly the way that everybody else does and just take what the experts say and do it and just see if I can survive. There would be no value to my own expansion of consciousness or my own contribution to civilization if I took that tack.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me too of like when I think about someone that is producing music and someone that is very artistic in that sense, you have to think outside of the box. You have to think outside of yourself because you're creating something new, and that's not necessarily an easy task to do. And so if you follow the grain and you do the same thing, you can make music, but it might not be that impactful. But like being someone that wants to create something new, I feel like that really forces you to look outside of what you are doing, who you are. And I feel like that kind of plays into your role, at least in your social media that I feel like I'm trying to like connect with, was a way to think differently. Even though, again, you said you kind of push against what is being told. And I do want to get on that. But I think one thing that interests me is, like, what does, like, it sounds like you're doing a lot. It sounds like you're making a book, right? You're creating a book. You do some music on the side. And you're a full-time farmer. Like, how can you fit that in? And dad, which is probably
and husband, yeah.
Yeah. So you got a lot of things going. What does the time actually look like for you? What does a day look like for you?
Well, luckily with the style of ranching that I do, I have the infrastructure set up where I just have to move cows, 2, 4, 6 times a day, and I just walk out and move them. Okay. And then I'm back in. So it's not like I'm spending all day. So maybe a max 2-3 hours of actual ranching and farming. Hopefully a couple of hours of riding. Obviously plenty of time being a husband and a father. And music doesn't get any time. I actually just released a record that I did 10 years ago with my band and good friends there in Oregon that just kind of sat on the shelf, and my wife was tired of not having any way to listen to it. So she put it up on Spotify so that she could just easily access it herself. But yeah, it's cool. And to me, I think the vast majority of time comes the value in my use of time is in thinking and I think pondering. And I approach thinking a little bit differently than other people do. There are 2 ways that I approach thinking. The first one is in just how I would approach it in my own mind. And I approach it in my own mind by going, okay, here is something that I want to think about. And then I implant it into my deep brain, and then I trust my deep hindbrain to do the work on it while I'm doing other stuff. I think active thinking is a profoundly useless undertaking. Like, I'm just going to sit here and think about something. I think that's a totally useless exercise in my opinion, unless you're writing about something. If you're writing about something, that's different. That's the other way that I think about thinking. And so the goal is to just accumulate as much knowledge that interests you in as many different areas as possible. Put it in your storeroom, and then you have like a terminal outside the storeroom and go, here's my query, and then you just hit enter, and then just see what comes up over time, and then trust your brain to come up with cool stuff. And then you'll be walking in the field and you go, oh, and then make a TikTok video or an Instagram video, and that's how it works for me. I try to spend as little time thinking as possible, and one thing I like to say is that when it comes to my brain, I don't check its work, so I'm just.
That's good. Well, I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you have maybe forced quiet time. Like, you have time to be able to think. So you can think about these things that interest you, and you don't necessarily have to sit on them because you go out and you're ranching and you're taking care of these things. So you're not kind of glued to a phone like most of our people that are living in cities, and they're indoors 24/7 doing nothing. You have more of a physical aspect of what your life looks like. Do you feel like that quiet time kind of plays into you being able to kind of think externally?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what humans are designed to do. Humans are designed to be walking around, gathering stuff, hunting. Look, people have agriculture wrong. In school, you're taught that agriculture was this genius invention, that we rose out of the slums and the muck and we figured out how to grow grains, and now we have civilization. And it's like that. No, agriculture happened because we had to figure out a way to feed ourselves. Like during the Pleistocene, which ended 12,800 years ago with a 1400 year period of hell, it destroyed the ecology. And we survived. We woke up on the other side of that, barely surviving, going, okay, the ecology is not providing for us what it used to. Like, that's the wisdom of the story of Garden of Eden, is that everything used to be really good. During the Pleistocene, the cranial capacity of humanity tripled. The idea is that agriculture is this great invention. No, it is a survival mechanism. The Pleistocene was 2.6 million years to 12,800 years ago. So it lasted basically 2.5 million years. And the cranial capacity of humans, of what, early hominid to Homo sapiens, tripled in size during that period. And there's no archaeological evidence that we had done any farming. So the ecology was so good, and our numbers were so in balance, and the ecology was so rich that our brain tripled in size without us inventing agriculture. And then suddenly we woke up one day and said, let's invent agriculture, things will be better. No, that's not how it worked. It sucks that we had to invent agriculture. That is not a good thing. That is not great. What that means is that we live in an extremely degraded ecology. And so we have to figure out how can we examine what was happening in terms of the ecological mechanisms back when things were real good, and then force reboot the ecology in a way that happened beforehand. Because agriculture itself, it's a story of let's fuck over our soil and until it doesn't work anymore, and then let's move to another part of the globe. That's the story of human civilization for the last 10,000 years. And then you go away, and then the place that you left somehow manages to rehabilitate itself a little bit, and then you can go back and harvest it again. So we've developed this sort of trinity of hallucination in our world, where we see agriculture, we see nature, and we see us. And the fact that we are building our our assumptions on those three things exist creates a lot of problem, because those three are inseparable and interconnected in a way that it's not even appropriate to think about them being interconnected. That's one of the things that I write about. It's just they're one, and if we can't, and that's what the basis of many of these traditions, these indigenous traditions their brains are oriented so they don't all of their actions and all of their thoughts are built on this foundation of complete unity of the environment, rather than, human activity, nature's activity, and then humanity itself being three different things. It's all one gymnastic occurring.
Yeah. Well, can you expand on that then? Like, because I'm trying to wrap my head. I understand that big agriculture is not great, but I want to know it on an in-depth level. So how they take care of the cows and how everything is actually produced and managed. What is the reason why that is actually so bad for our society and world?
Well, the reason it's so bad is because it produces distortions, and it creates death and destruction, and if from a physics standpoint, it creates unnecessary entropy. Unnecessary entropy is energy loss, and the ecosystem properly functioning is a fine-tuned mechanism for the transfer of energy. And what we have figured out how to do is brute force in an extremely inefficient way results. And the reason we are able to do this is because our brains are not properly oriented towards the world. And this is one of the things I'm working out in my book. My mentors, the really smart people, they say that cattle, and we'll talk about cattle in particular because that's my specialty. Cattle have a dual role, right? They have the role of efficiently transforming forage into protein and maintaining and improving the ecosystem, right? Those are the dual roles. I think that's wrong. I think that cattle have only one purpose, and cattle's purpose is to maintain and improve the ecosystem in a herd. That's their purpose, period. And the second that we allow ourselves to think about the protein as part of our fundamental paradigm, we create a system that creates distortions, right? Because think about it like this: being an athlete. Imagine you're a golfer.
Yeah.
There are two golfers pitted head to head, and they're gonna do a driving contest, and they're gonna do a driving contest right now, and they're gonna do a driving contest in a year. The first guy gets up there and he focuses on hitting the ball as hard as he possibly can and far as he possibly can. Okay, so he's got the outcome. He's focused on the outcome, right? The other person's like, okay, I'm not going to focus on hitting it as hard as I can. I'm going to focus on my technique. And then the person who focuses on hitting it as hard as they can, they win that first contest. And then a year goes by. Who do you think wins? Technique.
Yeah.
And so what my whole thesis is that by allowing the beef outcome to play any role in our management decision, we are producing a less efficient, less effective food production mechanism. And it's because it is all a derivative, a subset of the ecology. And so we must consider our management first and foremost from the ecology. And so when we're making management decisions, are we thinking, how many pounds of beef am I going to produce? No, we should be thinking, am I creating the most effective eco mechanism that I possibly can right now? Am I managing to create over the longest time horizon the most effective, the most efficient eco-maintenance mechanism that I possibly can? And in big cattle, we have had such a rich, basically, savings account in the soil that we've been able to go, and no predators, basically, for the last 12,000 years, that we can go, turn them out, get them fat. We'll just, we'll harvest them up, we'll gather them up, and we get plenty of beef. And right now we're finding that we've reached the limits on that. So, we have basically, and it's that we have created an industrial process. Ranching is not an industrial process. It is an ecological process. And the ecology works in a voluntary way. Industry works in an enforced way. Yep. Industry, you enforce the outcome that you want through industry. You pull the oil out of the ground, you install the factory, you make the thing. And with the ecology, you have to enter a voluntary relationship with it. You have to coax from it. If the ecology doesn't want to do it over the long term, it will die. And that's what we've done with big farming and big cattle, is that we have forced the ecology to produce this thing that it doesn't want to produce, and as a result, it is dying.
Yeah. Well, it's because then I'm thinking like, okay, well, what would they say back to that? We have to produce this much X, Y, or Z, beef, chicken, you name it, because we have, such a big population boom. We have so many people we need to feed. Is more of your kind of thesis and explanation of, hey, if we do this thing properly, we can still produce the same outcomes, but just in a much healthier way for the earth and for the cattle themselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because we are asking the ecology, what would you like? What would you like? And the way that we kind of figure that out is we go, okay, let's go back in time to what was happening when the ecology was so rich that humans didn't need to create agriculture. What was happening then? There was so much food around, and our ecosystems were so rich that we didn't need to create agriculture. So my thesis is that I'm a rancher and I don't give a fuck about the beef. And by doing so, I will create more beef per acre by entering into voluntary union with the ecology than somebody who is focused on getting the fattest calf that they possibly can. So that's why I don't allow the beef to enter into my thought at all when I'm making management decisions. It's inappropriate, it's unethical, it's amoral. I don't think that the indigenous people in the United States were like, you know what? I think we need to corral these bison so that we can make sure that we have really fatty marbled ribeyes. Like, no, they were just stoked. They knew that if it was a good year, they were going to have fattier animals. They knew if it was a drought year, they were going to have leaner animals. But they were just grateful to have food, and they entered into this union with the buffalo that was facilitated in their culture by the myths that their culture proliferated. And they entered into this union with the buffalo, and they were grateful and everybody was entering into this more or less voluntary thing, and they weren't trying to completely enforce the outcome of USDA prime beef, and that's complete. It's a completely inappropriate way to live, and it disgusts me actually when people are like, we need all of our beef to be USDA prime, which means fed into metabolic failure, and then feed that to our increasingly unhealthy population. It's like, no, that's not what we want. That's not what we need.
So then what would be a great way that we could take good steps to walk back big agriculture, big cattle? What would be the best way to do that?
I think the thing that we have to do first and foremost is to figure out how we can increase our stocking rates on existing farms and ranches. Because people will say, okay, well, we don't have the grass to finish these cattle. We have to put them in feedlots and then feed them, corn from your cornfields in Indiana. So obviously there's a ton of land, extremely high quality land, that's being used to grow monoculture crops, which is terrible for the environment. In the long term, you would want to put that back in pasture and then put livestock on it. Maybe you could pasture crop as well. But the question is, what's the first step? The first step and I write about this. I'm writing about this in my book right now. Is that we need effectively a Manhattan Project for high density grazing. We need to put trillions of dollars into water and fencing infrastructure across the United States, so that people have the ability to manage their cattle in a way that reflects that ancient migratory behavior. So, I mean, that's the bottom line, is that in the Pleistocene, what we've been talking around here is that you had these scary predators. Right now, let's see here. I was writing about this morning. The average on the African savanna right now, there's only one predator that's over 100 kilograms, and that's the lion. In the Pleistocene, there were lots of predators that were more than twice the size. So you had a 200 to 400 kilogram, the American lion, the cave lion, 200 to 400 kilograms, 150 to 200 with the Smilodon, which is the saber-toothed cat. These massive, scary predators that kept these mega herbivores, the elephants, bison, mastodon, mammoth, bunched up and moving. And it's that migratory activity that we have to facilitate over a new world, because we live in a world now that's dominated by humans, right? So we have to take that migratory activity and fractalize it, shrink it down and repeat it over lots of different little landscapes. And in order to do that, we need a lot of money thrown at fencing infrastructure and water infrastructure, and probably shade as well. Once the data is basically out on the efficacy of that activity, which it's really starting to come in waves now, and is going to really start increasing over the next decade, we're going to see that that's a really good idea. So we're going to have to do that. Number two, we're going to have to really focus on our genetics, because right now the genetics in cattle have been selected over the last 60 years to do well in feedlots. You have animals that do well in feedlots. Those are not the animals that do well on pasture. If you start designing animals to do really well, eating high energy feeds in a concentrated animal feeding environment, then what ends up happening is you have animals that don't do as well on pasture. And the reason for that is because of the animals that are selected to do that. The animals that make the slaughterhouses and the feedlots the most money tend to put on lean meat and water, and the animals that do well in pasture tend to put on fat. Because when you take food in, you can either put on lean meat or you can put on fat, and it's a percentage of both. And if you put on more fat, you're gonna be healthier in the pasture. Cattle need fat to cycle, they need fat to get pregnant, and they need fat to be fertile. So we've been selecting cattle to be basically infertile, so they will do very well in a feedlot. So that's the second thing we need to do. I know that was kind of boring, and thanks for hanging through there with me. But we need to really focus on how to select our cattle to do well on pasture instead of doing well on feedlots. And then we have to figure out how to decentralize our slaughter system in this country, because it's basically 4 companies that own 80% of all of the slaughterhouses, and they kill thousands and thousands of animals a day. We need small slaughterhouses in every county that does agriculture in this country, and we need them to be keyed up to be profitable with smaller framed animals, because it's the smaller framed animals that tend to do better on pasture. So it's a 3-pronged attack that we need to do, that we need to have billions, if not trillions of dollars thrown at. Water and fencing infrastructure, genetics of the animal, and not just the scientific, we have it in a completely laboratory environment and we're testing its efficiency. No, like how it actually does on the pasture, genetics. And then the third thing that we need to do is to figure out how we can renovate our slaughter system and get rid of this bullshit where we're constantly thinking about, the health and safety of people. Like come on now. A lot more beef is recalled from the giant slaughterhouses than comes out of the small and medium sized ones. So the increased red tape for the health and safety of our nation is causing a lot of problems. So So those three things I think would be a good step in the right direction. And if we can start to get momentum in that direction, then I think there will be less drive to be feeding these monocrops. And eventually, what's going to happen is people are going to find that there are more financial incentives and pressures to move away from the expensive fertilizers, the expensive herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, all of the inputs that are required to manage and maintain a monoculture environment growing corn. Not to mention the general consciousness in the population of people who are not yet aware but becoming increasingly aware that tillage on a huge scale kills everything, just everything. You know, when Thomas Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark, across to find the Pacific Ocean, explore the Louisiana Territory, they found just incredible biodiversity. Although it was still degraded from before into the Pleistocene, it was still an incredible biodiversity. Now they're just cornfields. Nothing lives there. It's all dead, and the fact that people are accepting that, I think, is beginning to change, that we want more life. We want a planet that is characterized by more life, not less life. So the financial pressures are going to change, and people's consciousness are going to change. People want to be part of something cool. They want to be part of a world that is better and healthier. We're finding that all of this, when we till through this huge anything that basically drains into the Mississippi River, we're just creating a huge dead zone with fertilizer and all of these nutrients that just flow in there. All the bacteria, all of the algae just eats it up, and that it creates this dead zone that consumes all of the oxygen. So people are becoming aware of that, and farmers are finally going to say, you know what, I think we just really need to get back to pasture in this, and create a better way to do this.
So it sounds like maybe even before that, you are doing the work. I'm trying to help you here, but it's first educating people on, how we can change these things, and then go to a smaller scale. So, maybe what you're saying is go to a local farmer and get your meat that way, because then you're feeding into a better, smaller system. Can people kind of, as yourself, start? I don't know if this is specifically what your book is about, but can people start on a smaller scale themselves with 2-3 cows and some land they want to start cattling on?
Yeah, absolutely you can. I mean, you got to make sure you have enough land, and you have to make sure that you have enough animals that, cattle are a herd animal, so you don't want to start with one.
Yeah.
Two's not great either. It's nice for them to be able to be in a herd. But yeah, people can start on a small scale. The issue is that it takes about the same amount of time to manage 10 cows as it takes to manage 100. So there is an advantage to having more. But ultimately, for me, if they want to have the same basically ethos that I did, it was that I don't care how many cows I have. I'm going to do it no matter how few or many cows I have, because it's the right thing to do. Like, I was born into this world, into the conventional cattle world. When I was born, I actually my mother and my biological father, who is not with us anymore, they lived in a single wide trailer on a feed lot. So
Wow.
yeah, it's quite a interesting story there. But I was born in that environment, and then my granddad managed big ranches. I was out with him on the big ranches, and I saw these environments. I saw these degrading ranches, these degrading landscapes, where people talk about how 100 years ago people would have to change horseback at midday because the horses were so tired from going through the tall grass, which there was no tall grass anymore. So, like, what's going on? And then I started learning about this, and I realized that, okay, I'm going to have to do this even if I fail. I'm going to have to do this even if it kills me. And in fact, if I do it well, it will kill me. I mean, that's my overall ethos, is to exhaust myself in service of the ecology, and then die. Like, that's it.
That's the circle of life that you're shooting for.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So then what does it take then for us to maybe mimic you in a smaller scale if someone felt like, this is their calling too, and they wanted to try to kind of follow in your footsteps? You need 10 acres, like you said, 20 cows. How can they just ease their way into something like that?
Well, what I coach people to do is if you really want to do this, you got to find land that's being unused. Certain parts of the country, it's going to be easier than others. I have basically one of my students, a guy in North Carolina. He called me 2 years ago for the first consultation. He had no cows, didn't really have any money, and he didn't have any land. I was like, dude, you just got to find some land. If you want land bad enough, you'll find it. Go on the tax website for your county. They should have a GIS map. Just look around on there and see, drive around. You'll see land that's generally unused. And then once you find it, you just pour yourself into it. If you got to get up early and you can only move the cows once a day, great, get up early and move the cows once a day. And then once you do that, you have to recognize that it's a performance art. That's how I got started, is I realized that, I have enough money to have basically 10 cows. That's what I got. And I have no land, and I have a little bit of money, I have no land, and I have no cows. So what am I going to do? Okay, I have enough money to buy basically 10 cows. And so I found land that was in very conspicuous areas, and then I started doing my little crazy high density thing where a lot of people could see it, and then it started to make waves, and people are like, what's going on? And it's still early enough that people outside of the regenerative community have no idea what you're doing. If you have these these little hot wire lines that you're moving them around and your cattle are all grouped up tight, and if you can do that next to a big highway, great, even better. So that's what I did, and within several months I had people calling me, how can I be involved? Can I invest? Can we buy some cattle together and you can finish them and we can split the profits, yada yada. So it's I'm a big proponent that this reality is a video game, and if you put something out there, you can influence the code on the back end and it'll give you what you want. So so do that, put it out there, write down your goals, write down what you want specifically, and envision it happening and envision it having already happened, and it will. That's just the way it is. At a certain point, you will have to jump and just do it.
Yep.
That's with everything in life. You reach a certain point and you just have to jump, and you will know when that moment happens. You'll say, okay, do I have the balls to do this, or am I going to turn back? And then when that happens, you just got to jump.
I love it. I might have to do it at some point, but I do want to walk back onto the soil side of things, because I feel like it needs to be ingrained on maybe how bad the monocropping actually is. And then it would be interesting to kind of have you kind of explain, if it's even possible, can we fix and save that soil? So maybe can we just start with, your ideas on why specifically monocropping is just so bad for the soil that we have?
Well, monocropping is super bad for the soil because, number one, they take a lot of the biomass away. You turn that biomass into corn, you take the corn away. Like some of the stalks get left in the field sometimes, but by and large, the majority of that biomass that's produced by the soil, which is a living, intelligent being, and it will benefit us to start viewing the soil as a living, intelligent being. It creates this material, is forced to create this material, and then it has that material taken away instead of being recycled into the soil. And one of the other reasons it's so bad is that largely it's based on tillage. There is some movement away from that into no-till, which is basically not turning the ground over. When you turn the ground over, you expose all of those carbon-based molecules, and that's what life is. That's what soil organic matter is, and they're more likely to volatilize off into the atmosphere. So definitely till it, and when you do that, you get a heavy rain. All of that topsoil just washes on down into your nearest creek, stream, river, or bay. So those are two of the main reasons that monoculture is bad. I mean, they're also, the biodiversity is extremely important. It's like the planet has an operating system. It's like came with a playbook, and it's like as many different types of life per square yard as possible. Okay, great. Well, then how about let's only grow one type of life per square yard, and that's a corn plant. We only want that. And so where does it say that in the operating system? It doesn't. Like, okay, that's actually really, that's in the troubleshooting section, right? Like that's not good. We shouldn't be doing, it's not working. Do you not have enough life forms per square yard? So that's a real problem. That would never occur in nature. Monoculture would just almost never occur in nature. And we just don't know. We've lost how to mimic nature. We basically figured out this little hack, that we can cut into the ground, put a seed there, and it'll grow. And it's been working. And then we discovered fossil energy, and we figured out how to make it work on steroids, and all that did was screw us up faster. It's like a cocaine addict coming into an inheritance windfall is basically what happened. So now we're at the end of that. We've come to the end of our savings, and there are a few of us like, maybe we should stop doing coke and blowing money, and maybe start some exercise and meditation instead. I think that might be a more iterative, repeatable process for us. So that's one of the big reasons. And another big reason is that human beings are just not designed to do that. We're not designed to just sit in one place and grow one type of food and then eat this one type of strange food. It's just not like our hardware. Our brain is old. It's old, and it was formed in the savannah where massive herds came through and revivified the ecology every year. I was reading yesterday on a paper that basically the human beings moving into Europe was facilitated by following the mega herbivores. They create the environment that's good for us. Go to Central Park in New York City. What do you see? It's a perfect savanna. Go to any park, any golf course, any rich person's estate, and people create a savanna. And a savanna ecology is only maintainable over the long term by massive herds of herbivores, of forage-eating animals. This is actually part of a lecture that I've given a bunch over the last year about. It's called Herds in the Human Spirit. How basically humanity itself, in my opinion, is a derivative of herd animals. Humanity would be infinitely better off if we were eating meat all the time and no grain. That we would be so much better off as a species, because that's what we evolved eating: roots, fruits, nuts, meat, honey. Almost the grain is not in there. That's not what we're designed to eat. And the more we eat of it, the worse our health gets. And the reason we eat so much of it is because it is so it's paired so well with technology. And technology is about brute force in a lot of cases. And so it pairs so well with technology, so it continues to proliferate. Whereas all of the other foods that we're designed to eat are facilitated by voluntary interaction and voluntary agreement. You go, it's hard to grow an almond. It's expensive to grow an almond because that has to be you can't force an almond the same way you can force the same way you can force corn. It's not as easy, because corn is way more tuned in with technology and almonds way less. And so also we are, the further we go down the rabbit hole of technology, I know Elon Musk and Bill Gates would probably disagree with this very strongly, but the more we go down the technology rabbit hole, the unhappier we are, And so ultimately for me, going into farming, going into ranching, if it's something that somebody wants to do, it's important for your own personal lifestyle, for your existence, your temporary moment on this planet. And for civilization at large, we have to figure out a way to transition. I'm not saying stop to today and just turn on mass famine, starvation, and chaos, which it would. We have to intelligently transition into systems of voluntary interaction with the ecology. I mean, that's basically what we have to do. And sadly, and I've learned this pretty distinctly over the last many years, is that it's annual cycles. It's all annual cycles, and our world is dictated by quarterly profits. And so we live in a world where where it doesn't matter, generally speaking, what season it is to 98% of people. Aside from taking their kids to soccer practice. For me, the season matters every single second of the day. all of my decision making processes are profoundly influenced by what season it is, what's happening in this season, what are the animals doing, what are the bugs doing, what are the trees and plants doing. It's all seasonal, and that's the way that humans are designed to be. So for me, like, getting away from this process is not just like, how can we create a more sustainable food source so humans can keep engaging in their messed up behavior and this strange world that we live in. It's about how can we rebuild from the ground up our relationship with reality itself. And I almost want to say our relationship with nature, but when I say our relationship with nature, that makes them two things. And that's not appropriate. Because us and you can see how just even engaging in the conversation from that way creates a fundamental assumption of separateness, right? And so we have to figure out a way to start thinking about things from a fundamental assumption of unity. And that's one of the things that I've been writing about so much. And that's why I think it's dangerous, kind of moving away from your question, that's why I think it's dangerous to think about cattle as having a dual role of being protein producers and eco-mechanisms, because they're only eco-mechanisms, and if we only think about that, then we'll have plenty of protein, because everything dies and is eaten. So we have to create as many alive things as possible, and we create the most alive things by making sure they are in harmony and voluntary association with the greater ecological system.
I feel like we've gotten farther away from nature, and I'm now reseparating. Don't attack me on this, but once we've built the cities to where, we implant the trees that weren't there because we destroyed everything, and so I feel like we've created our world to be separate, and people don't like to be as connected as they used to, because obviously we didn't really have a choice, but we have a choice now to live in the big city. That is, you go to any grocery store, you could go to Walmart and you could pick up everything you need, and you never have to put in any work and make a voluntary relationship with that nature that we're separated from. Do you think you need to pull people out of those cities to start to change us and nature into just one unity?
Absolutely. I think that as much as I was bad talking technology earlier, I think that if we use technology wisely, it will facilitate that. If Starlink is a good example. I think if Starlink, solar energy, if we can have decentralized energy production, whether it's small fusion cores or solar or wind or hydrogen facilities, whatever it is. Then I think that we will be able to really spread out into into nature and to be able to produce more right where we are. Obviously, the amount of rainfall an environment gets is going to facilitate how much we can produce, but I think the more that our technology allows us to decentralize, the more that we will be able to rejoin nature and recreate so much life. And I know that's actually a horrifying thought to a lot of people, that we would impose and infringe on nature that way by moving more people out to nature. But if humans have somehow developed a different relationship with reality, such that they view themselves as completely interconnected with nature, then I think that's the best thing that could possibly happen. And I think that the one of the biggest problems with our current conservation philosophy is this idea that we have to keep it out there and us in here. I think that's a horrifying thing, because it limits the possibility. Like, imagine if we could create a world that has more life and more effective, efficient carbon cycles, nutrient cycles, water cycles than ever existed before in the history of the world. Even before humans came along and with their conscious brains started messing with things, even at the height of the best part of nature previous to us, what if we could make it better? And I have to believe that we can make it better, and we can develop strategies to do that, where we can have more forms of life per square mile than ever before in the history of ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I did want to get kind of onto that topic of, you kind of going through why is it so important that we have regenerative agriculture when it comes to climate? Everyone talks about, we're ruining the climate, and it's, farming that's ruining it, all the cows farting, and, all this, I don't know if it's propaganda, but I would love for you to kind of explain why maybe this way of farming is actually the answer to said problem, or at least one of the answers.
Well, one of the things that people will say is it the answer or is it an answer? And I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's the most important tool that we need to focus on right now. Look, I mean, during the Pleistocene, there were way more big animals than we have now, of much larger size, and the atmospheric carbon level was half of what it is now. It was 200 parts per million. Now it's 400 plus parts per million, and that's because we've been burning a shit ton of black goo for the last century. That's why. The cow farts are only a problem because they're locked in feedlots and they can't be doing their job in the ecology. That's the only reason. It's actually burps. It's the thing you have to understand about a cow is that it exists as a digestive technology to process forage. That's what it exists to do. It eats for 8 hours a day. It doesn't eat to feed itself. It eats to maintain the ecology. That's its job. It's a ruminant. Bison are ruminants. Auroch, which is what a cow was domesticated from, is a ruminant. A ruminant is a fermentation tank. You take grass, you put it in the fermentation tank, microbes break it down. They're brewing beer and then eating the beer in their lower stomachs. That's effectively what's happening. That is a brilliant, genius technology to maintain the ecosystem. The other half of that is the hindgut fermenters, like a horse or an elephant or a mammoth or a mastodon. They get by on poorer forages, and they typically, in a natural setting, sweep behind the ruminants and clean up the rest of the garbage forage. And we don't have them anymore. That's another big problem that we can get into at a later date. But effectively, we need to get cattle out of the feedlots and into their eco-maintenance orientation towards the world. They need to be oriented so that they can do their job. This is the problem. We've been thinking of them as protein sources, and you follow that to its logical conclusion, and you have them locked in a dirt lot, standing in their own shit, eating corn. That's what happens if you think of them as a protein source. But if you think of them as an eco-maintenance mechanism, you can't come to that conclusion, because that would be an insane thing to do if you were thinking about it from that perspective. And then people wouldn't be thinking at all about the methane, because properly maintained pasture produces 100 times the hydroxyl ions that cancel out the methane, that help it break down into carbon dioxide, which is the much less lethal, less potent greenhouse gas. So the cows are actually, when they're doing their job in the ecology, they're producing all of the necessary mechanisms to break that methane down into carbon dioxide so that they can keep things happening healthily. Decarbonization is important, and I believe that with I think that we're going to have to manage as much of the planet's surface as possible for carbon, and to increase the amount of carbon. And the only way to do that is to view the planet from an ecological perspective instead of a human commodity driven perspective. And I know that makes me sound like some weird greenie or communist or something, but I'm not. And I hope that the free market can find answers to this. And I know there are a lot of really smart people trying to figure out ways to get the free market to realize that, or to generate through the free market products and methods that are so much better that they just become the way that people are doing things. Yeah. But at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, is bottom up gonna do it, or does top down have to come in to some degree? Like, do we have to insist that people start wearing seat belts? Or are people gonna realize that seat belts are just the best way to do it and start using it of their own accord? Like, people didn't start using seat belts until we were forced to use seat belts, and now everybody uses seat belts, and less people die in car wrecks. So. I think there has to be a good balance of bottom-up voluntary transition, and hopefully through better products and better processes. And I think that there will have to be, to some degree as well, some minor form of enforcement to help the bad actors along their way. I think that's a tough discussion to have, but it's a discussion that's going to have to be had. I'm a fervent leave me the fuck alone type of person, but I also am willing to entertain other ideas.
Yeah. Well, so you brought this up, just speaking about how we analyze and look at things, and you've been explaining that, but you had a post that talked about how we're looking at, and this goes into the whole climate thing, of how we're viewing cows of taking up this much amount of water. Can you kind of just elaborate on the idea of how it's backwards to look at, these animals of just taking up water and just stealing our resources versus them, again, being a part of the ecology?
Yeah, that's what happens when you view things as an industrial process, as a commodity, right? We view these cattle as an industrial process, and you start to think about it like through industrial terms. How many yards of cloth to make a dress? How many whatever? How many pounds of steel to make a ship? That's not how the ecology works. Cattle are basically an extremely good irrigation mechanism. They take water, they pour it into their body, and then they deposit it heavy in nitrogen on the ground. Everywhere a cow pees is the equivalent of 1.5 inches of rain.
Oh wow!
I did the math on that. And plus it's got nitrogen in it, so it's fertilizer. So they're taking water from these centralized locations and they're decentralizing it for the benefit of the ecology. Now imagine if they're properly oriented in a herd, then they're taking that and then taking that water and they're putting it on the landscape. They're cycling it on the landscape in a group. It's an effective way of redistributing precipitation. Like it's an ecological mechanism. That's what it's for. And so if you think this cow takes 500 gallons of water to produce, 5 pounds of steak, like that's just an extremely reductive, human egocentric way of looking at the world. It's wrong, and it's unsophisticated.
Yeah. Well, then based off of just lack of understanding, we can see how these cows are foraging and eating. There's the whole argument between grass-fed, grass-finished, grain-fed, grain-finished. What would actually be the logic behind eating grass-fed, grass-finished meat?
That's what humans are designed to eat. We're designed to follow the herd animals and then eat them. That's the deal. These animals need a predator. Nothing exists in nature without predation. Murder is an extremely important ecological mechanism, and it keeps the whole cycle of life and death. And I think this is also one of our problems. We've lost our mythological connection for the last 100 years. Effectively, the foundation of Christianity has been dead. So we're basically floating with no mythology now. We don't have a good indigenous mythology. We don't have a good Christian mythology. And all of these mythologies give us a more comfortable relationship with death. And we are so afraid of our own death that we can't even begin to approach the death of other beings. Like, so what we all need to do is serve the ecology and then die. Be in service of life and then die. That you can't honestly look at a feedlot and go, okay, it's more efficient. It's better for the bottom line, and then zoom way out and go, is that what humanity is about? is that really why we're here? So that we can turn beef growing into an industrial process? Like, is that is that going to cultivate the human spirit? Like, no, it's not. So the argument between grain-fed and grass-fed is built on the idea of what's more efficient from an industrial paradigm. And that's not important. It's not important. It's when we're able to separate ourselves from the industrial paradigm and begin to look at things from the ecological paradigm, the paradigm that actually has a chance to continue to work over centuries, then you realize it's insane to feed something that the animal was not designed to eat to it in captivity until it's in metabolic failure, and then promote that as the best stuff to your increasingly unhealthy population. Like, that's just, it's complete lunacy to me. Complete lunacy.
Oh, well, I love it. I feel like I've just gained so much knowledge just within this hour. I do want to finish because I might be the first person buying this book. Can you kind of give us as much of a summary of your book as possible that's not kind of spoiling it?
No, it's true. I mean, ultimately, it's an overview of how to properly look at the ecology, and all the way down to what I call the axiomatic presuppositions, like this is the boring part of the book. I will straight up tell you, philosophy majors will love it. Like, how do we go down to the root axioms, which is like, the world exists. Like, that's one of the most fundamental assumptions we can make about reality, right? Like, the world exists, and then build up from there, and so how I can build a proper scaffolded, internally consistent system for viewing the world. Okay. And then once you have that foundation, then you can start talking about nature as being separate. Then you can start talking about you and me versus the one unity. And so then we talk about the savanna, the Pleistocene, how humanity co-evolved, and is basically a derivative of the herds. I talk about effectively the mythology of herd animals and how they appear in our mythology, and how, when you see, for instance, I haven't written about this, but yet, for instance, like bullfighting in Spain, like, you see it makes sense. There's something about that just makes sense on a deep, deep level. It's about the dance between herd animal and human that just makes sense. And so the role that herd animals play in mythology, I write about that some. And then I write about, let's see, I think I actually might even have it kind of pulled up here if I can. I write a lot about the physics of grazing. I write about a herd of cattle as a thermodynamic system. So that's, how if we are looking at cattle properly, we would be viewing them as a thermodynamic system, which they are. Let's see. I talk a bit about death. Death is important, and then at the end, I kind of I've begun working on how might a Manhattan Project for grazing manifest if we really got our act together and started doing that. It's still a work in progress, certainly, but I'm more motivated than ever to finish it, and I think the big idea from the book is that we cannot look at cattle as a source of beef and expect to get a good outcome. You're only going to get a good beef outcome over the long term with good ecological results if we stop thinking about the beef at all in our management decisions and developing the argument to support that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. It's been super enticing for me, because now it makes me want to just go run out into a field and start my own. But yeah, thanks for popping on, and I feel like everyone who's watching will gain as much as I just did. So thank you for your time.
I hope so.
All right, brother. Well,
awesome.
We'll catch you around, and I'll still be following and listening to all the knowledge. So keep it up.
Right on. Thanks, Brandon. It was great talking to you.